really got to try on that left-hand side. What happened?
Oh, but I've gone up and over and bloody head over biscuit. It wasn't enough stability there for myself, but no, I was busting for a bit of meat this game. It didn't seem to work out.
Hello, cheers, and welcome to the Scrum of the Earth podcast, the weekly show for news, reviews, great interviews, and so much more, all about the world of rugby. As always, my name is David Lawrence. I'm an American rugby fan who follows the game wherever I can find it, all over the globe. If you'd like to get in touch, I'm on Blue Sky @ofscrum, and you can always just drop an email to thescrumoftheearth@gmail.com. Well, this is, finally, Part 4 of what I'm calling the Quad Pod, where we're dropping 4 podcasts over just 3 or 4 days. We started with Robbie Knock on Sunday. We covered round 1 and sort of previewed a little bit, sort of a combination pre/review of Super Rugby. Part 3 was, of course, in the Northern Hemisphere. But now I am beyond thrilled to say we've got the return of one of my favorite all-time guests as we bring you the lovely sultry tones of the one and only Dallen Stanford, a man who brings the bombs to the comms, a man with more quips than an armada of sunk ships. Dallen, my friend, welcome back, and how the heck are you?
Thank you so much for having me on, David. It's been a long time, my friend, but yeah, all good this side. The year started off a bit shaky with everything in Los Angeles, but we're back on track. The sun is shining and rugby has started.
Well, that's my very first question. I didn't want to let the opportunity go by. I'm not going to lie, I was a little concerned about you and other friends I've got out there in Southern California. Everything back to as much as normal as it can be. Are people kind of acting like, well, that never happened, just getting past it, or is that even possible?
Well, you're right. The people that were affected, that's not possible. You know, it's a tragic situation for those in Altadena and those obviously in the Palisades. So many people lost their jobs, they lost their homes. And again, I don't really, know what those people are thinking currently. Some of them obviously have left LA. Some of them are still staying around. The rebuilding phase is going to take years, So, yeah. It's such a difficult situation. For us, even just, we weren't luckily affected, but we did leave the area just to be safe because of the smoke in the area and things. So Verity and I, we went out of town for, it was a week. It was a weird situation, living out of your bag, not knowing what's going on. And then, checking the wildfire apps to see where those fires were spreading. And what the scary thing was, like the first night I went to bed and I slept like a log, but Verity was up with her phone and the fires spread from 1 acre to 100 acres in a matter of minutes, and then it's 200, then it's 1,000, and so it's panic stations, So and some of them were started, by people, which is terrible, and some people are being caught and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a tricky situation. I think even us, we were considering maybe moving to another state potentially, but we've just come back from the East Coast and we're enjoying living in Los Angeles. So it's a really crazy situation. I do hope, though, that precautions are taken for anything down the line because, these things will happen again.
Yeah, I mean, saying that I hope there were lessons learned doesn't do any good for any of the people. A good friend of mine has been living there for years. He lost a 40-year guitar collection, among other things. But anyway, I'm very gratified to know that you and your family are all right. Don't want to belabor it, too, as well. The first thing I want to get into with you, of course, Major League Rugby is back. By the way, have you noticed people tend to say the MLR, even though that would make it the Major League Rugby? It just always cracks me up, and I do love it. Either way, Season 8 kicked off this weekend. As you know, I'm a huge Free Jacks fan and a founding member. How excited should I be for this season?
Very excited. By the look of your colorful Hawaiian shirt, I'm just loving what I'm seeing on that side. It's epic. So, I got a chance to call the very first game. With the great thing about this season is that they're flying me back to Austin, Texas to call some games, which is awesome. So I'll be in studio about 6-7 times. I'll be calling a Free Jacks game. Actually, it'll be my 100th game in MLR. And that's one on, March 8th against Seattle, which is really great. But let's go back to the beginning. The very first game, Miami against DC, to open things up. It was ridiculous to see because firstly, Miami, they played so well. They've got, some brilliant Argentine players, Tomas Kubeli, Tomas Kubisha on fire. They were beating DC 29-10. And honestly, as a commentator, you obviously got to keep positive. You got to talk equally about both sides. But in the game, I'm obviously thinking, all right, Miami have this by far, right? There's not a single, I would put money right there and then, even my house. And the next thing, you got Jason Robertson, who I call Jason Bourne now. The guy's ridiculous. He's an assassin. He scores a brilliant try. It then sets up the final moment of the game where all Miami have to do, by the way, is turn around, kick the ball towards their own try line area out, run it out, pass it out, do whatever they can to get the ball out of bounds. but somehow I'm not sure what the reserve scrum off was thinking by kicking it over into the field of play. It gets charged down, and then there's like 2 minutes of mayhem with a cross kick, and Alex Mueller gets his hat trick and the match winner with the conversion to follow. It was pandemonium. I've never seen anything like it. But yeah, that was to start us out. Then I got a chance to go down to San Diego and do sideline work there. So nice to see them back at Torero Stadium. It kind of reminded me of New England when I was there for all the free games, where you're very close to the field. You can, as a player, you can hear the crowd roar and you're right in where Legion used to play in Snapdragon Stadium, which is a beautiful venue, of course, where the final was there and everything else, but their people are quite far from the action. And it's quite a big stadium, so this is very intimate. It's about a 6,000 seater, and it was loud. There were people roaring.
Is this their new home, or was this just for the first game? Or
it's going to be their new home. They're basically back to Torero Stadium. So when I haven't looked that far ahead on the schedule, but the Free Jacks, when they do meet at some point, I forget if they're playing at home or away, Torero Stadium is going to be quite a fortress to play at. And the way John Manenti, who's an Australian Sevens Olympic coach for the men and women's sides in years gone by, they were up 28-0 playing Sevens. It was keep throwing the ball around and stuff like that. Seattle did well in the second half, which is good. And then your team, the Free Jacks, of course, my missus being from Massachusetts, I tell everyone in the broadcast, I have to support them by default, which I obviously love the Free Jacks. But close game against LA. I'm happy that Los Angeles have signed some big names and are in a new venue as well at UCLA, so more people can watch. And that's like a nice attended game as well with the crowd there too. So all things just looking very positive after round one. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, by the way, San Diego are coming to Fort Quincy for the first time in their history this year, so I'm very excited for that one.
Got it. Yeah.
And I feel like we kind of build into our seasons. Last year felt a little shaky at the start. This year, I'm grateful to get out of there with a win. That's what we wanted.
Yes.
The small margin doesn't concern me at this point. I feel like we're building, and with the experience this team has, I feel like that's okay. It's okay to sort of build into it and take your time, and we can watch the other teams like DC get excited and stuff, and we'll just bide our time.
Yes, exactly. Now I want to say Coach Ryan Martin, I really enjoyed working with him. Of course, Scott Matthew, phenomenal, but he has moved on obviously to Scotland. But Marto, I just remember because we did a lot of fun coaches interviews every week, and he just cracked me up. The guy, obviously, super smart when it comes to the X's and O's of rugby, but he's just such a character. So I'm happy to see him back. I look forward to seeing him in person one of these days at one of the games. But things are looking very good for the Free Jacks.
For sure. By the way, you mentioned that you're doing some games and you're going down to Austin. You used to go you'd be in Austin, you'd be in Indianapolis. Is that still a hub for broadcasting? Are they still doing those same things?
Yes, it is. So the two studios are still in Indy and Austin. I've only put my name up to go to Austin. It's a little bit closer. Plus, Barry and I used to live there many years ago. And so we love going back there and seeing friends, and the food is delicious and some great places to go out. So that's what I got on the card. In fact, we go again on Thursday. So not a lot of rest here. Nice. And then I think I'm calling the Anthems hosting San Diego on Friday, and then Sunday Miami against NOLA in the Shark Tank again. So it's quite nice. So I'll be going back quite a few times between that and doing 4 sideline games in San Diego. And then we have a European trip for a month again, like we did last year, doing the Algarve Sevens in Portugal and a couple of events in England as well. So it's and then 10s. There's some 10s happening in between that as well. So it's quite a busy first 5-6 months of the year.
Well, as somebody who religiously follows Super Rugby, I love seeing some of the players that kind of just pop up here and there in Major League Rugby. A guy like Christian Leali'ifano, he can only be good for this competition. I've been a huge Lincoln McClutchy fan for a long time, and there's a great picture of you with him just from this weekend. How nice is it to see some of these faces showing up in our competition here domestically?
David, you know what's so interesting? In the first few years of MLR, we saw a lot of players that were at the end of their careers internationally. They would come across to the US and obviously have a great time experiencing America, playing in Major League Rugby, helping the players around them, definitely elevating the level. But now we're seeing younger and younger players coming through as well. So I love to see that. Like Lincoln McClutchy, chatting to him, I mean, the guy's got some unbelievable moves. He just come from Super Rugby as well. So these players are fresh. The physicality, I will say, being sideline, it's next level. It's different when you're calling a game from the booth. You can see the field, sure. But standing sideline, watching these hits, being right there next to action, everybody is getting bigger. They're getting stronger. They're getting faster. The skill level is phenomenal. It's really good to see. I think the league is really in a good place in terms of the quality of play. And I think that's what people can be most proud of. And also what I'm proud of too are the American players that are starting and doing so well. You saw Ryan James scoring a couple of great jobs in the wing. We got some young props in the league, 3 scrum halves from DC that are all American qualified. So there's so many teams that are really doing a good job with the American players, because that was one of my concerns. Obviously I sound like I have an accent, but I did represent the US in rugby. So I'm passionately keen to see America succeed, particularly the Fiends. The Sevens option, obviously, the US has done really well on the women's side and the men's side over the years too. But Fiends has eluded us in the men's game. So, building towards the next Rugby World Cup coming up, obviously the US needs to qualify, and then of course we host. So it's important that these American players shine in MLR.
It's interesting because when you have a competition like the NFL that's been around forever, it feels like there's X amount of talent across the league, and so this year this team goes down, and then this team goes up, but it kind of sort of net is the same. It seems like MLR is not like that. It feels like it's getting better every single year. It feels like all the teams are better this year, including teams like Anthem. I expect a few wins out of them this year.
Yes, absolutely. I think I got a good chance to chat to some of the coaches ahead of, the prep for the games I was calling. What was really nice chatting to Jose Pellicina from the Miami Sharks is they had 1 year. Anybody's first year is going to be tricky. And so they had a ton of learning lessons and how to build a team from scratch. So that's year 2, they could be switched on and hone and focus. And also they know which players to pick up, where were they missing in the first year. And that's the same for Anthem. That'll be the same for teams that are even in their second to third year. They keep learning every time, which I think is great. So that's the important thing about teams. When you sometimes see the East and West conferences and you have a team that's brand new, it's not ideal for that side of the conference. But now you look at the Eastern Conference, how good are all the teams? You know what I mean? It's really fascinating to see. If you look at the Western Conference, outside of San Diego, every other team dropped the game, top 10. So it just shows you that how strong the conferences are and how much better each team is becoming as their growth continues.
Well, I can't have you on and not ask my beloved Free Jacks. Here goes. Will they make history with the first ever MLR three-peat this year?
I will say this, from the opening weekend, seeing the talent on display and seeing how good the teams are, it's a long year. That's the great thing. Even chatting to the Seattle players afterwards, they were obviously disappointed for losing against that rival game against San Diego. But, some of the players and coaches were like, hey, listen, we know this is just match 1. You look at Free Jacks last year. They dropped a few games to some of their teams in the East Coast. So it doesn't matter. Will the Free Jacks, I think they're in a strong position. They have a great squad, but it's all going to come down to, like it always does, those last few weeks, how healthy is your squad? And that's the important thing, because you can have all these big names and great players that do really well for the first, 8 rounds or so, but then it's how you finish. And so that's generally where the Free Jacks have been good. Their depth has been excellent, and their players obviously are outstanding. But I think this year, the competition is going to be a step above. Just looking at that Western side, whoever finishes in the Western Conference Final is going to be very, very good. So I think it's going to be, as tight as a boxer's glove. I always like to say that.
Well, you're right about how injuries can make such a big difference. And now you're not allowed to just bring in Waisaki Naholo at the end of the year. So
yes, exactly. It makes a difference.
Am I still bitter
right?
about that? No, definitely not. That was a really weird feeling seeing him at Fort Quincy, because I'm such a fan of his, and yet he's playing for New York, and I'm like, hey, it's Waisaki. Oh, damn it. It was very strange.
I know. It's funny, right? When you see the signings, you're like, oh, no, please don't go to the opposition.
Well, of course, you're my favorite person to talk to Sevens about. You're probably the reason I'm watching Sevens and I've become an avid fan. The Sevens, it's back. The current World Series is in full swing. We've got the 4th leg coming up this weekend. What has been your sort of overall takeaway from what we've seen in the first 3 legs? Well,
what's really exciting about the Sevens series, look, there are a couple of things there that are hard to follow, and I know that the new audience tuning in, we're wondering about the schedule, because sometimes it's a 2-day tournament, sometimes a 3-day tournament, sometimes it goes straight to the semifinals, other times you have your traditional quarterfinals, which I do love, because I think those knockout games are thrilling. What I really enjoyed on the men's side of things, teams like Spain have been remarkable. A team like Uruguay have been amazing. So the South American teams have really stood up to be counted. And then what's crazy is if you look at let's look at the men's side of it first. So you've got 6 teams that have been on the podium this season. So that shows you how spread out it is as well. you've got Fiji, Argentina, and Spain all tied on 48 competition points, all of them tied, which is unbelievable. I don't think I've seen a season that's been that close. South Africa, who've won one gold medal, is in fourth, and then France, who've won a silver, are in fifth. So it's phenomenal. I honestly don't know who to pick as that goes through. On the women's side of things, too, we've seen some unbelievable finals, in particular with New Zealand and Australia, a couple of times on their side of things. So, which is interesting because Australia on the women's side have won 2 gold medals, yet they don't lead the series. After 3, which is consistency as well as important in the game of sevens. So I've enjoyed obviously some of the crowds that have come out. Looking ahead to Vancouver, what's really amazing about that is because it's a closed dome stadium, it is so perfect for the fans because it doesn't matter what the conditions are like in Canada, because sometimes it is raining or snowing or very cold. But that's one of the great stops in the 7 series.
Well, you already mentioned the tables. I had it queued up for our next little slide there. Our USA women, they're looking really good. They're holding on to 4th place behind New Zealand, Australia, and France. Still holding 1 spot ahead of Canada, that bodes well for us. And you already mentioned our men. They're struggling a little bit. They're currently out of contention. They're tied for that bottom spot. Are you surprised by those results at all so far?
You know what is so hard? When I was watching the men compete, so Simon Amor, new coach, he's got to firstly develop his style with the new group of players. They played some very good rugby in some of the tournaments. But honestly went down to the final play and a try either way. And you've got some very experienced teams in the series. The US have blooded a lot of new players, as you would under any new coach. There's a handful of players that have stood out. But for me, it's tough, right? Because at that level, it's so ruthless. Now with only 12 teams, you can't anymore have a game where, you're well ahead of the opposition. So you won one game. So really, you just need to win your second game to get to the quarterfinals. Now it's so tough. So I think that's hard for them. I think they are 11th place, as you said, so that does not good, because what happens, as we know now with the series, you've got your 6 regular stops, and then 6 events, and then a World Championship in LA, which we get to host here nearby. What's fascinating about that is the bottom 4 coming up in the Challenger Series is going to be very good, and then of course the bottom 4 from the normal series then play against them, and then whoever is left standing, the top 4 go through to the series, which is hard. For example, you can't have Canada not playing, in their own event, which will happen. They'll play they'll have a FOS 4, I think they're calling it, this coming weekend, where Canada will still feature, so the home crowd can watch their team play. But the fact that they're not on the men's side as a core team will definitely hurts them, right? I mean, you're not going to come watch, necessarily an event if your country's not playing, let's say it's your home country. So it's important that Canada and USA stay on the series. Like any other teams, having Kenya back has been fantastic. Their crowd, still the best in the business.
Oh, yeah. I have become a massive Kenya fan recently.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if there's 10 fans there or 100. It's this raucous, noisy singing and dancing. Oh, man. Makes me wish I was playing for Kenya, that's for sure.
Well, David, my favorite storytelling about the Kenyan fans was when my very first time in Los Angeles, I think it was about 2004. I went to the first sevens leg ever here on the United States soil. And I had 2 great Kenyan friends. We used to play rugby together here in Los Angeles. And they said, Dallen, come to the sevens. I said, oh, absolutely, I'll be at the sevens. They go, no, come with us. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So for those 2 days, it was the biggest party. All of us lost our voices at the end of it. It was the best chanting and dancing and celebrating. I can't even remember if Kenya won a game or not. But anyway, when they did score a try, we went absolutely bonkers. It was the best weekend ever.
So the USA women, we've had quite a lot of shakeup in terms of squad selection, but they've still been producing. Is that just like a testament to the depth that we got in our program at this stage?
Yes, and I would say the structure that Emily Bardwell and Zach Test have put in place really helps this team. When I saw them in the PR7s several months ago, before the series started out, it was challenging to see how those new players slotted in, and I think the US lacked a little bit of speed as well. So the fact that Spiff Cedric's coming back ahead of Vancouver is fantastic as one of the co-captains, but Christy Kersey's still there, New England faithful as well. Some players like Kayla Kinnett just pulled the strings, put the team together. Then a lot of new faces, which is good. Awesome. I think Lo Cicero and Alyssa Porter, so a lot of new names, which is really good. So the fact that they are getting good, valuable experience is important because, of course, we know without Alona Mar and some of the bigger names like that, the US have not reached the finals they thought they would get to. They did get to one of the finals, which is great. So that just shows you also how tight the women's series is,
Well, you mentioned some new faces. We had I don't know anything about her. I'm told that we had a 15s college star, Tessa Hahn. Have you had a look at her yet? I know she's getting a debut this weekend.
Yes, I know her name. Another one of those rising stars. I haven't seen her in recent times, so I'd be very curious to see how she goes. And there's a handful of players that are young that are coming through on the both the men and the women's side, which is really exciting. And I think that's kind of what this year is about. As we work towards LA 2028, it's about uncovering, number one, what players can cut it at the top, and also, if you have one or two disappointing tournaments, can you bounce back from that? How's your mental strength as well to come through as well? Because international sevens has changed quite a lot over the last few years. With the depth of players, you being a full-time professional as well. How do players react to that? So I think it'll be interesting to see how things end up. And again, of course, with the women's side of things, which is, they're looking to see how high they can finish that championship in Los Angeles, which, by the way, I don't know what your thoughts are. I was a traditional fan of the series being whatever number of stops it is, and you keep the points at the end, right? Because that shows you consistently and how teams are finished. Where a winner-takes-all event to me is not necessarily, in my opinion, the best way, because in sevens, anybody could win on any given day, right? So to be crowned a champion for the year by winning that one event, and I know they've termed it slightly different. So you've got your season champions, and then you've got your, world championship winner. But I used to prefer the way it was, to be honest.
All codes of rugby, man. They just love tinkering. They're like, oh, you know what worked last year? Let's not do that. Let's make it something else. It confuses everyone. Maybe they're just trying to keep you in work so you can explain it to the fans.
Exactly.
Well, the PWR is wrapping up in a couple of weeks in England. I'm wondering what that might mean for our women's squad. Players like Lev Kelter, is she gearing up for a World Cup run, or do you see her coming back to our sevens program? Seems like a lot of people are saying, no, it's 15s from here on out until that World Cup.
Yes, I think a lot of the 15-a-side players would stick to that, because that World Cup is going to be so big. I mean, honestly, it's going to be so well attended. I think most of the games are going to be sold out. They've sold record tickets already, which is fantastic. Yeah. And the fact that everybody's buzzing about, the past Olympics, Alona Ma's been playing there, as well as, as yet Kelton, all these brilliant players. The focus is on a World Cup. Look, I will say this, to play in a Rugby World Cup, it is such a unique and special occasion, and you don't always get that chance. If you're playing, let's say you play for 8 years, you might be injured those few months that the World Cup, or that sort of thing. So these players, they are focusing. That's their one goal to focus on, which is great, because let's be fair, the 7 Series is there, right? So as long as it keeps going, that's fine. You've got the Olympics coming up. You can always join 2 years ahead of that, or even next year. So I think the focus must be on 15s, and also for the US to be as good as they can be with all their talented players, to see how far we can go.
So who are some other players on the women's squad who you're expecting big things from? We already, I kind of highlighted Nia Tolliver right there at the beginning. Ariana Ramsey has been phenomenal. A newer standout for me has been Jessica Liu, who has quite a resume outside of rugby as well. Like, if she stops playing sevens, I think she's going to be okay.
Yes, she'll be fine. Exactly. That's right. Super intelligent. You mentioned Tolliver, but really, definitely one of my new favorites on the series. Every time the game is very close, she takes the outside gap and just bomb storms away past people, which is great to see. And again, listen, Spiff Cedric coming back, I think that's going to be really good for her to, get back on the series. I had her on my podcast, The Rugby Hive, several months ago, and she was just enjoying taking a bit of a break after, what was just an unbelievable Olympic Games. So, I mentioned a couple of the newer players like Porter and La Cicero. There are a handful of them that are shining and are doing really well, which is great to see. And then on the men's side of things, I still love, Lucas Lacamp. Tala Talapusi has done really well in recent tournaments. Will Chevalier, very good at controlling things. Great. Yeah, and a great work rate. He's always in support, which is awesome. I wasn't sure how he would go at the next level. He was brilliant at, Rugby Town Sevens and Club Nationals and all that stuff, but he's really put his hand up at the higher level. The big frame of Aaron Cummins, the Hulk, obviously you need power like that. But the men too, they still, they still have a little ways to go.
Well, this weekend, our men are in a pool with Fiji, Spain, and Uruguay. What do you think? Is this our chance to finally stick it to those flying Fijians?
You know what? What is amazing? So in years gone by, if you were in a pool with Spain and Uruguay, you would say, cool, we're going to have 2 wins. And then the Fiji game could go either way. Or if Fiji on fire, then good luck. It'll be, 30, 40 points to them. Now, with Spain playing the way they are, Uruguay playing the way they are, the US it'll be very challenging to get a single win. And so that is the honest nature of where the Sevens World Series is at.
We got to be targeting Uruguay just because of how good Spain are right now.
Yes, exactly. And you say that Uruguay beat New Zealand the last time they were out, so it's sevens it's been turned on its head, which is what you want. And that's why I'm a big fan of sevens. I'm glad you've turned on to sevens as well, because 15s is way more predictable, right? You're not going to necessarily have an Uruguay beating a New Zealand in 15s, but in sevens, it can happen.
Yeah. That was an amazing start to the tournament. I think 2 games in a row they came out
Yes.
and shocked people. They always scare me. There's something about them too. But meanwhile, the women, of course, in pool with China, Ireland, and New Zealand. I gotta see what you think. Like the turnaround in the last 12 or 14 months for that Ireland squad, it's been incredible. What have they figured out? Like, what's the shamrock that they're magically drinking over there?
Yeah, well, what's interesting? Ireland actually were very good a few years ago. I remember commentating. It was coming out of the COVID times, and we were in Malaga and Sevilla in Spain, and Ireland were fantastic. They made the finals. I think they won their first tournament as well. They beat Australia. So they're a side that have now got the right people in the right places, which is really good. I've always been impressed by them. So to me, it's nothing new that they're going to be they're getting at least top 5 or 6 places, which is great. So in that pool, obviously the USA need to win their 2 games to continue marching through. The New Zealand game's going to be tough because we know how good the Blackburn Sevens are, and so that's always going to be a challenge. But I think they can win the other games.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
She's not Michaela Blyde anymore. Michaela Brake, I think it is now.
Yes,
she's back.
Brake. Yeah.
She looks like she's making up for lost time. She's like, what? How many tournaments did I miss? Okay, that's how many exponents I'm going to add to my try total here.
Exactly, the try-scoring machines, and there's so many try-scoring machines. Of course, we know how Australia has all the weapons in their side as well, but New Zealand, that's why those finals are thrilling. I wrote down the scores here just to remind myself. In Dubai, how Australia won 28-24 against New Zealand. And then in Perth, Australia won 28-26 against New Zealand in an absolute thriller, right?
It was amazing. It's funny, in the Olympics, when we ultimately lost to New Zealand, which I didn't mind because I was expecting that. And when I was watching that game, all I could think was the thing we're missing is little bits, like little bits of footwork, the things that the New Zealand sort of wisdom that rugby knows they have, they just have all the little things, and that's all we are behind. I do think we're that close to being really at the top.
Yes, I agree. And look, if you look at Australia and New Zealand, they are in the women's side, 2 of the most creative teams in manipulating space and to be wrong-footing defenders and creating overlaps and things like that. The US is definitely catching up with that as well, and defensively are able to read it for the most part. And that's why they were able to beat Australia at the Olympic Games, which is great, and a few times on the series. I still think New Zealand, if you look at the head-to-heads, they obviously have a tremendous win ratio against the US. But again, saying that, anything can happen in the game of sevens, particularly if you catch somebody off guard and they just have an off game, which happens. So that's kind of why sometimes if you look at like a Fiji in some tournaments ago, you want to get them on match 1, because match 1, they haven't had anything under their belt, type thing, and you can catch them unawares, and all of a sudden the 50-50 passes come through, and that's how you can beat a team like Fiji on the men's side.
It's interesting. You might just tell me that I'm a crazy tinfoil hat wearing fan at this point, because I'd like to think maybe we're inside Australia's head just a little bit. It's been a couple in a row where they were favored to win and we stole it, and our squad already looks good. They're about to lose some players like Maddie Levi. First of all, the injury, but also she's already said she's going to Super W so she can get ready in 15 shape for the World Cup. But we've already got the squad that is this close, and so I don't know. Am I crazy to think that this is a pretty good year to be USA?
No, you're not crazy at all. And the fact that, as you said, players will be leaving and going to 15s. It's quite nice that some of the other countries are finally doing that, right? Because Maddie Levi, what a threat on the field. I mean, she's so hard to stop. And so, yes, I think that is very good. In terms of being in someone's head, that's interesting because psychologically, obviously, people think, I remember when I was playing for the USA, we were going up against New Zealand often in the quarterfinals, and that was quite hard because we hadn't ever beaten New Zealand ever in sevens in the men's side of it. So the fact that the US have done it against Australia now quite a few times, that is really good. It gives players confidence to know that, listen, it doesn't really matter. Yes, they've won a couple of gold medals, but this is a new tournament and this is just 14 minutes of rugby, and we can get through it by focusing on the next task. But mentally, I think you're so right. To have those victories under their belt, it's very good for the future.
Well, I love talking the USA Sevens, but of course the tournament isn't all about us, I guess. But so I'm wondering, this weekend, who are we looking forward to? What are you looking forward to? Is there maybe a men's team and a women's team that you think might kind of surprise somebody or change some minds?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So on the women's side of things, I think it'll be still interesting to see how New Zealand do bounce back. So because of Australia beating them in a couple of finals, they're always going to be there or thereabouts. I wouldn't be surprised, if the USA or France, somebody can come through into the final again, which would be really good. So there, it's quite tricky. I mean, money would probably be, if we look at this weekend, probably Australia. But again, as you said, if some of the players are missing, then I'm going to go New Zealand on that one, and hopefully USA make that final, and who knows, could cause some sort of upset. On the men's side of things, I think it's just fascinating because you've got Spain, who've been excellent, so consistent. Argentina, who were brilliant in Perth, who I do love, Los Pumas Sevens. So it's really between the Fiji, Argentina, Spain. You've got South Africa, and then I wouldn't count out something like France as well. So the good thing is you've got a handful of teams that could come through. Luckily, I don't place, or not even allowed to, but I wouldn't place bets on the sevens because you really don't know. So it's anyone's game. Who do you think? Who are your favorites?
I have one. For me, I've been impressed what I've been seeing from the Brazilian women. I feel like they're this close to making that leap. Do you think they might creep into medal contention at some point?
That would be wonderful to see. Talia Costa, their flyer on the wing, is such a special player to watch. I would love to see it, and that's the great thing. And same on the men's side when we saw Uruguay and Spain doing so well. On the women's side, it would be really nice to see another contender coming in, which is interesting because I was looking at the 9 podium finishes on the women's side have been only completed by 4 teams, right? So that tells you those 4 teams are consistently medaling. When the men's side, you've got 6 teams. And I did some analysis many years ago when I was talking on another podcast about just looking at the two different competitiveness, the nature of the sevens. On the men's side of it, I think I counted that there were, out of the, back then there were 16 teams playing on the series, like 13 had won a cup title.
Wow.
Of the 16. Canada did it once in, Singapore, USA have done it several times. On the women's side, though, there were only 6 had won it at that point in time. Now, things have probably changed over the years, or maybe not, because if you look now, again, only 4 teams have been on the podium and medaled. So it's interesting to see how, because the men's series have been for longer, for sure. That's kind of why. But you really want to see that women's teams coming up, particularly like Brazil, as you said, those up-and-comers.
Well, I think we're under some sort of legal obligation to talk about Ilona Maher. She's had some remarkable moments in the PWR over a pretty short period, and her Bears are now guaranteed a playoff appearance as of just a couple of days ago. What's been your take on the whole Ilona odyssey? Some people think it was a terrible idea. For me, I'm like, you know what? Ilona seems like somebody who, when she decides to do something, she does it, and I would advise not to bet against her.
She is a brilliant role model. She's a brilliant person. She speaks so well. I think what has been so heartwarming about the whole story is that you've got people that didn't follow rugby that are now following it only because of her. And I think that is fantastic. You said some people might not agree with her decisions. I think her decisions are spot on. She dominated here in the US. She did, obviously the Dancing with the Stars show. Then she went to the UK to prepare for 15s, which is phenomenal, and drawing in a new crowd and a new experience for her. She's so funny. She's so charismatic. We are so lucky to have her as a role model, as an ambassador for young girls, for young women, for just people in general. The great thing is chatting to most non-rugby people. They used to only know the All Black haka, right? Now they know Ilona Maher. And they're like, oh, American player Ilona Maher. So I think that is so good for us. She has really broken all those barriers. I'm obviously a huge fan. Every time, she's promoting the sport that we've always loved and promoted, but she obviously has the reach that we've never been able to achieve. And through anyone, even if it's a Sia Khaleesi and things like that, while obviously, players like that have been phenomenal ambassadors for the sport, Ilona Maher has taken it to the next level.
Are there any other players for the U.S. that you're hoping will maybe see go from the 7s to the 15s? There's somebody you can see sort of slotting into a larger squad like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. We've seen in the past quite a few players who have been tremendously quick, who've been able to slot in on the wing or on the centers. And so, and Alev Kelter is a good example of that. And in fact, Ilona Maher was one that I called a game. It was just coming out of COVID, Stars versus Stripes, where it was her first time and she played on the wing for the USA women in one of those trial matches. And it was great because both wings and in the midfield were all from 7s. And so that really does translate really well. Like Christy Kershey, I think she could be a great center in the game of 15s. Spiff Cedric, obviously on the wing, could play fullback as well. So there's a handful of players I think that could stand out. And then Tolliver as well. Nia Tolliver, don't forget. Imagine run in midfield, right? 12, just running crash lines or burning people. So again, what's interesting is, and we had a point in time where we as the USA women and men became professional 7s players. there was a question whether did we have enough players to in 15s internationals and sevens, because the pool was very small back then in the day. So a lot of players, like I was playing with Todd Clever and Chris Wiles in sevens, but then 2 weeks time they were playing international 15s, and then switching between the two, very difficult at the highest level, where other countries had a core group of sevens and a core group of 15s players. So we are seeing players still switch. I think more so in countries like Canada and USA, where we haven't got a massive playing pool at the highest level. So players do, and they can choose, because things are a few years apart, the World Cups and the Olympics.
Well, before we wrap up the sevens, just before we started recording, you mentioned a specific sevens player that we wanted to highlight, and I want to make sure that we get the info in the show notes here. Can you tell us who's on your mind right now?
Yes, Jill Potter's on my mind. I got a message a few days ago about Jill Potter, who is going through her 6th round of cancer treatment. She's fighting, as she always has over the years. She's a former 15s and 7s Eagle, a wonderful human being. The rugby community needs to rally around her as well. There is a link that you're going to put up, so people can support her on social media as she goes through this, this terrible thing again. But I remember her from many, many years ago when I was early in my commentating career. Jill Potter, she was such a player on the field, and I know she's fighting off the field as well. But our thoughts are with her from the rugby community, and I know you'll post a link there, so appreciate all the support.
100%. Dallen, my friend, you're the absolute best. I always appreciate your time, and frankly, talking to you is like manna for my freezing little soul over here under the icy mounds. But before I let you go, I need to find out what's coming up for you. We've talked before about Flag X. I'm dying for an update there, but I also understand you've got something else in the works, something that's launching very soon.
Yes, that's right. In fact, it's breaking news on your show, which I think is great.
Yes.
So, but let's go Flag X first. So Flag X, we've had a busy couple of months to kick off the year. We recently signed an exclusive partnership with NCR. That's the National Collegiate Rugby Organization. Over 600 colleges, men and women's colleges, universities, programs in the US. We had a webinar with about 50 of those teams.
Wow.
And listen to this, one of them is going to win. We haven't announced the winner yet, but one of them is winning a package where Perry Baker flies to their program, wherever they are in the US, flies to them and spends a few days there running them through sevens coaching and training as they prepare for the CRCs, which are happening in April 25 to 27.
Wow.
So that's cool. So imagine that.
I would advise those people to start drinking Gatorade now.
Exactly. So the Speed Stick is going to be joining them and introducing Flag X to all these different teams as well. So we've had a huge interest. So we're currently in the process of sending equipment bags to all these different teams that are interested. So more and more teams are now signing up. So I bet you next time we talk, I'll be able to tell you, all right, now we've got 35 states involved and all these different teams playing, which is really exciting. So the game is really taken off, and it's been a good start to the year. And then, my friend,
and you're adding to the fabric of USA Rugby. Like this is strengthening, sort of at these base levels. This is all such great news as we head. You can tell my excitement is starting to build towards the American World Cup.
Yes, it is really, like we've said before, each one of us, so you included, you're doing wonderful work promoting the game in your space that you have access to. And the same for me. I obviously love the game. I love commentating, but more so, I love introducing the game to new people or current players who are upskilling themselves or getting alumni involved and keeping active in that way. And like this non-contact game, I think is perfect for that, so that's wonderful. And then I want to touch on the broadcasting program. So first of its kind, when I was coming into rugby commentary, I was just a former player who was passionate about the game, who was excited about it. I didn't study journalism. I didn't go to broadcasting school. And so it was really just learning on the job. And, my first few years of doing this, I had no idea what I was doing. But luckily, over the years, I got a chance to work with some unbelievable, remarkable international commentators. I got to see how they operated. I got to learn from every single commentator, take something away every time I got a chance to work on a World 7 series or World 15s match. And so it's really cool. I get a chance now. I'm teaming up with the Rugby 10s organization, who are based out here in San Clemente, California. And we're going to be delivering the very first broadcast commentary program starting next month. It's going to be a 3-level course delivered online, but a rare opportunity for anybody who's passionate about, gaining knowledge and practical skills to work in broadcasting in rugby commentary. I've received many messages over the years, young students that are like, hey, Dallen, I'd like to be a commentator like you are. How do I do it? Right. So that's always a tricky one because, you can give somebody advice. You can give somebody advice, but you've got to learn some of the basics. So, how do you, if you want to be a play-by-play or you want to be an analyst or a sideline reporter or even an MC. So all those are going to be offered in the course. And we're starting out, it's just going to be available initially to 5 men and 5 women who have played in the Rugby 10s series. So that's people who've been involved in the Rugby 10s over the years. And so we'll do that course first. We're going to start on March 19th. And we'll do another one on the 26th and April 2nd. And then after that, the course will be open to the public. So other people could sign up for it and things like that. So I'm really excited about it because
that's fantastic.
It's growing, the broadcasting side of things, which even in MLR, we've got, a lot of new voices, a lot of new broadcasters. And I think, it's important to develop that aspect of the game as well.
Will Hooley's been doing a great job, I think. I feel like just in a couple of years, if we've seen him, I don't know why I'm acting like I'm his dad or something like but we've really seen him grow.
Well, I'm actually working with Will this weekend. We're doing a couple of games together. We'll be teaming up again later this season as well. Will's wonderful. He speaks so well. Also, what is really nice, and this is the interesting thing, a lot of rugby players when they retire, particularly at the highest level like Will playing international rugby, you look for another career that is in line with what you love, which is rugby, right? So that's hard, and there's only limited spots available. But Will's done a great job of being in the media space as a commentator, as a show host as well, with the Rugby Rundown, and also a great character also who knows the game really well. And that's the important thing. Not everybody who played makes a great commentator. So it's so awesome to see people like Will step into that role.
I am curious, but last question here. Because you're somebody who's known for some of the clever remarks you've made during broadcasts. A lot of people, they hear your name and then they quote one of your famous lines. So after the Women's World Cup, the woman who was calling one of the England games, I heard a great interview with her, and she said she had a couple things in the bag. She was waiting to use these.
Yeah.
And one of them, she busted it out, and it was the now famous line where she said, "Oh, Abby Dow, behave." And she had that ready to go, and she saw this breakaway and was like, "I'm going to do it." And she dropped it. And then in a couple of seconds, it looked like she was going to get tackled, and in which case, that's not making the highlight package, and no one's ever mentioning it again. She was like, "No!" Have you ever had that feeling?
Well, what's so funny about that is you're right. I exactly like that commentator. I have a few in the bag, particularly like a Rugby World Cup, because, it's a big audience and people are, watching from around the globe. And you want to do it justice too, in that it must fit the right moment and opportunity. And sometimes there have been games where I've had, a couple of things and I've kept them back because it wasn't right. And so, He's More Danger. Climate change was right for that moment, I felt, and it fit in well. But there have been moments too. Now, this is interesting. In MLR, actually, in the years gone by, where, and even the Free Jacks, they scored like an unbelievable try, and I've set a line or two, and then the referee would then call them back because the TMO spotted something. So that is rare. I haven't had that happen internationally, but it happened in MLR a couple of times. And so I was like, oh man, that's not going to make the highlights.
Well, the obvious solution is you just need to get some things in the bag about the TMO, then just switch.
Exactly. That's right. 100%. Now, listen, we also must touch on that the news got announced today that the All Blacks are playing Ireland in Chicago at Soldier Field
Road,
on November 1st. Yeah. So now I was there in 2016. I took my wife Verity along. It was a very first international live 15-a-side game. And it was the one where Ireland beat New Zealand for the first time in 108 years.
And I'd say there's a pretty good Irish population in Chicago. I feel like that might have been a pretty big celebration.
A great celebration. I mean, look, Chicago is a wonderful city. There's so much great food, a lot of great bars. And again, whether it's Ireland or New Zealand, also great people from both those countries. So I've already got my tickets, actually. I managed to get a line on the inside from the Irish RFU, don't tell anyone, and whooshka, we'll see you there, my friend.
That's incredible. What a matchup that's going to be then too. But anyway, I'm getting there's too much rugby happening right now. Super Rugby's back, Major League Rugby's back. The Sevens are happening this weekend. Woo! I'm going to need a nap one of these days.
Well, listen, you do such a good job promoting it all, and you do so many different shows. I honestly don't know how you keep it up. I mean, you got bonus shows every week.
Yeah, well, I found a little more time on my hands recently, so I'm kind of loaded for bear for these few days. Dallen Stanford, you are a gentleman and a scholar. You're one of the best there has ever been at what you do. I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much once again. I hope you and your family stay safe and happy. Any final words for us before you get going?
No, just so people to tune in. I know it's sometimes difficult to find which network's showing which events and which tournament, things like that. But just keep watching this beautiful game. You've got the Six Nations, you've got the Sevens, you've got the 15s, you've got it all.
How big is it that MLR now has this new deal with ESPN Plus? Like, I don't know. I literally didn't know a single person who had Fox S1 or whatever it was. But I know tons of people, including myself, with ESPN Plus. Like, this is a big deal for me.
Yes, exactly. And what's interesting, I've read comments online. People are like, oh, they're not sure how it works. They're like, do ESPN supply new commentators? No. So what I want to just explain to the audience who watch MLR, it's the same setup, the same camera people that the stadiums have used before, the same commentators. Everything's the same. It's just now it appears on ESPN Plus, which is great. Some games on ESPN. I think the access is really good. Internationally, you can still watch on the Rugby Network, which is good. And there'll be some other broadcasters, by the way, and I'm not going to give it away yet, that are maybe going to pick it up potentially in other countries. So I think this is very exciting for MLR. There's an interest, there's a demand, because we have so many international players playing as well from around the globe. People do want to check in and see how their fellow country folks are doing.
Do you feel the momentum building?
I do. Right? I certainly do. Season 8. We again, on the opening broadcast, we got a chance to talk a bit and look back over the last 8 years. And number one, the main thing is that it's in a great place. Yes, there's some teams have come and gone, and that is expected to happen in any startup league. But the fact that it's going strong, yes, there are 11 teams, not the ideal, even number on both Western and Eastern Conference. But people are coming out, in thousands to support, teams playing at home. They're building rugby in the community. I think that's wonderful. Even growing the women's game, which is important too. While this is a men's league, when I was in San Diego, they've hired 2 women that are leading up women's and girls rugby in the region, and that is fantastic. You want the game to grow, in the men's and women's side.
Speaking of which, the WER is supposed to start next
Yes.
month. I've already got some merch in the mail coming my way from my Boston Banshees. I can't wait.
Brilliant. No, I love it. Also, the great branding. They're building a good hype around it. I think this is wonderful. It's such an exciting point. I'm glad you bring it up, because it is a first, and we're lucky enough to see it unfold. And it's only going to go from strength to strength. So you've got the Banshees winning the first year, right?
Of course, obviously. Then we'll be talking three-peat in a couple years from now,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Dallen, my friend, thank you again for your time. I'm going to let you go. Cheers. Talk to you soon, and be well.
Thank you so much, my friend.
You want to tempt the wrath of the whatever from high atop the thing?